Sleepwalk with Me by Birbiglia. I want to tell you some stories, and they're true. I always have to point this out because whenever I tell stories, people always ask me, was that true? And I say, yeah. And they say, was it? And I don't really know how to respond to that. I mean, I guess I could say it louder. Yeah! That's probably true. He said it louder. Growing up, I was discouraged from telling personal stories. My dad often used the phrase, don't tell anyone, but not about creepy things. I don't want to lead you down the wrong path. It would be about insignificant things. Like, I wouldn't make the soccer team, and my dad would say, don't tell anyone. And I would say, they're going to know when they show up to the games that I'm not on the team, and I'm crying. One time, I built up the courage to ask him about this, which was tough because my dad is a very serious man. How come you play everything so close to the vest? My father said, the more people know about you, the more they can use it against you. This sent shivers down my spine because it had that kind of open-ended fear to it. Like that feeling you get when you're driving and you see a cop, and you're not speeding, you don't have drugs, but you're just thinking, oh, I hope he doesn't notice I'm driving. Once in a while, I told personal stories at the dinner table, and my dad would say, hush, which is one way to address a problem. Just keep it under wraps. That's what my dad would say whenever anyone told uncomfortable stories. So I developed this habit of telling uncomfortable stories. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a rapper, a comedian, a poet, a professional basketball player, a country singer, a breakdancer, or the owner of a pizza restaurant where third graders could hang out. Breakdancing was the least realistic of these early goals. I mean, first of all, I am no good at it. I have no flexibility and very little rhythm. On the other hand, I did have some large pieces of cardboard in the attic, as well as a mixtape called Awesome Summer '82. But even if I had gotten my popping and locking figured out, it's really hard to pay rent with a day's worth of nickels thrown at you on a subway platform. But I didn't know all this on the blisteringly hot summer day when my siblings took me to see the movie Breaking. I was only 6, but since I was the youngest of 4 kids, my mom had finally given up on asking questions like, is this movie appropriate for a 6-year-old? Instead, she just asked my sister Gina, it's a full 2 hours, right? We climbed out of the station wagon and our mom sped away. Inside the theater, I was instantly sold. I was just like those urban teenagers who breakdanced competitively. And besides, my older siblings and I were the only people in the theater. So, we breakdanced along with the movie. First, we breakdanced in the aisles. And when no one objected to that, on the carpet separating the screen from the seats. Everyone had a great time, but I had an epiphany. I am a breakdancer. This is what I do. My dad's a doctor, and I'm a breakdancer. My siblings were completely behind me. The next day, they invited their friends over to our house, and they said, show them your breakdancing moves. They're so good. I started flopping around on the floor, and my legs were flying out in the air, and everyone was laughing and having a great time. It was my first brush with live performance. And delusion. I was a big dreamer and never particularly good at anything. A real dilemma. I wasn't terrible, I was just okay. If you're terrible, you can write everybody off. Like, I don't know what those idiots are doing. But I knew what those idiots were doing. And I knew that they did it better than me. In the 3rd grade, I was selected to compete in the 50-yard dash on behalf of St. Mary's School in the town track meet. The town track meet brought together kids from our town's 3 enormous public schools and my tiny Catholic grade school. My best friend Matthew Sullivan had won all of the qualifying events held beforehand at school, but it was school policy that he could only choose one for the track meet. That way more kids could participate. Regardless of this technicality, it was a huge honor to be named to the St. Mary's squad. For a 3rd grader, the town track meet is the most cosmopolitan event in your life. There's an ice cream truck. There are tons of those public school kids that we Catholic school kids have been warned about. From an early age, we've been told that public school kids were people who would stab you for looking at them the wrong way. At the time, I had in my mind that I would defeat these stabbers in the 50-yard dash. No one bothered to tell me that my tiny Catholic grade school was invited to the track meet only as some sort of token gesture. It was the public school administrator's way of saying, we don't hate you Catholic people. Come, let's watch our children run faster than your children. No one bothered to tell me that my school usually finished dead last. And I wasn't even the fastest 50-yard dasher in my class. My parents believed in me. The night before the track meet, my mom made a big pasta dinner because everyone knows the secret to winning the 50-yard dash is massive helpings of fettuccine alfredo, accompanied by unlimited salad or breadsticks. I went to sleep with a dream of victory. Race day. On the drive over to the track, my parents stopped at the drugstore to grab some M&Ms. My parents figure, the right combination of pasta and candy, will allow me to overcome 11 years of physical mediocrity. I show up at the track meet, and the whole town seems to be there. A coordinator directs me to that group, and I spot the 4 people I'm running against. I see that one of them is Calvin Walker. He's smiling and he's stretching his long legs, and I can see that he's wearing special running shoes. I'm concerned. Calvin is not nervous. This is a guy who knows how to run, a guy who has run before, on purpose. And I remember thinking, this is one of those guys who runs for fun, and not just because his older brother is chasing him with a tennis racket, or because he thinks he can catch the ice cream. It dawns on me that I need to reset my expectations. It does not matter how many M&Ms I eat, I am not going to win this race. In fact, not only am I not going to win, but it may appear to the casual observer that I am not even in the same race as Calvin Walker. At this point, my only hope is that maybe all these other losers are slower than me. Little do I know that these other losers are all thinking the same thing, and their reality is much closer to the truth. Because when the starting gun goes off, all those losers disappear, and I'm left spinning in a puff of smoke like Wile E. Coyote. About 20 yards into the 50-yard dash, I'm losing by about 10 yards. I've never been great at math, but I'm losing by 20% of the total race distance. So, 20 yards into the 50-yard dash, I do what many quitters and fakers have done before me. I run off the track and I grab my toe, hopping up and down in faux pain. And to make matters worse, I stuck to my story for so many weeks afterwards that even I started to believe it. Why had my toe given out? Old age? Not enough toe stretching? In retrospect, I should have told everyone that the kids from public school had stabbed my toe. In 2003, I started to get concerned about my sleep. I started having these episodes where I would get up out of my bed. I remember thinking, maybe I should see a doctor. And then I thought, maybe I'll eat dinner. And I went with dinner for years. But I did buy a book. It was called The Promise of Sleep, written by a guy named Dr. Dement, which is a very unfortunate name for a man trying to instill calm in his readers. I think he could have opted for a pseudonym like Dr. Happy Sleep or Dr. Chamomile Tea. But I did read The Promise of Sleep. I skipped to a chapter on sleep disorders. I came across something called REM behavior disorder, which is a condition where people have a dopamine deficiency. Dopamine is the chemical released into your brain that paralyzes you so you don't act on what's happening in your brain. I learned that people who have this deficiency have in rare instances been known to kill the person they're in bed with while remaining asleep. And I read this, and I thought, that sounds a lot like what I have. And I still didn't see a doctor. So it's 2005, and I'm in Walla Walla, Washington. I'm lying in bed at La Quinta Inn, and I have a dream. There's a guided missile headed towards my room. And there are all these military personnel in the room. And I jump out of bed, and I say, what's the plan? And they say, the missile coordinates are set specifically on you. And I decided in my dream, and as it turns out, in my life, to jump out my window. Now, there are 2 important details here. One is that I was staying on the 2nd floor. 2, the window was closed. So I jumped through the window, like the Hulk. That's how I explained it at the emergency room. I was like, you know the Hulk? You know how he just kind of jumps through windows and walls? So I jumped through the window, and this is the hardest part to explain. I jumped through the window, fell 2 stories, landed on the front lawn of the hotel, got up, and kept running. I'm running, and I'm slowly realizing that I'm on the front lawn of La Quinta Inn in Walla Walla, Washington, in my underwear, bleeding. And I'm like, oh, no. But at the moment, the only thing I can think is that I'm relieved I haven't been hit by the missile. That would have been a disaster, unless I'm still in the game. At the time, I was like, oh, I guess I'll walk to the front desk and explain what happened. Fortunately, the person working at the front desk was completely unfazed by what had just happened. It's 3 in the morning. I'm standing at reception in my underwear, bleeding. The phones are ringing off the hook from people staying at the hotel who just saw the guy jump out the window. And I said, hello. Because you have to start somewhere. I'm staying at the hotel, and I had an incident, and I jumped out my window, and I need to go to the hospital. And I'll never forget his reaction. He just said, all right. And I thought, that's the best possible reaction I can receive at this juncture. So I drove myself to the hospital. I didn't see any other options. I was bleeding and shouting and had to explain what happened 3 times to the receptionist, the nurse, and the doctor. I'm the Hulk. I'm the Hulk. I'm the Hulk. And one guy corrected me, no, you're Bruce Banner. Point taken, nerd. I was lying in a hospital bed, and I could see glass shards coming out of my legs. It was the most pain I had ever felt. It was the physical pain of glass coming out of my legs, combined with the emotional pain of there's glass coming out of my legs. How could I get to a point where there's glass coming out of my legs? Eventually the doctor came in and he took the pieces of glass out of my legs. He put in 33 stitches, and then I drove myself back to the hotel and got a new room because I felt like that one had a stigma. And a slight draft. I'm driving home, and I walk into my parents' house around 1 a.m., and my dad is up reading in the living room, and I sit down on the couch, and I'm upset. And he says, "How have you been feeling?" Actually, not great. So I tell him the whole sleepwalking story from the beginning. At the end of the conversation, my father gets up, and he says, "You know you're going to have to take care of this. You know you're going to have to see a doctor regularly. You're going to have to take care of this because it's not going to take care of itself." And he walks into his bedroom. And when he's about to close the door, he looks at me for a few moments, and he says, "Whatever you do, don't tell anyone."